This is CX of M Radio, the voice of customer experience professionals.
Welcome to another episode of Press 1 for Nick. Your host, Nick Glimsdahl, is the Director of Contact Center Solutions at VDS. Through conversations with customer service and customer experience leaders, Nick and his guests exchange insightful stories, best practices, and invaluable lessons they have learned along the way.
Welcome to the Press 1 for Nick podcast. My name is Nick Glimsdahl, and my guest this week is Gene Smith. Gene serves as a Senior Vice President and Athletic Director at The Ohio State University. Smith is a former student athlete and coach who has earned a reputation for advocating for student athletes and increasing the support they receive. Smith was intimately involved in the crafting of the name, image, and likeness, NIL, with the NCAA legislation, and was a fierce advocate for student athletes to have the opportunity to train and compete during the pandemic. Gene, welcome to the Press 1 for Nick podcast.
Well, thank you, Nick. Appreciate the opportunity to be here.
You bet. So one question I ask every single guest is, what's one thing people might not know about you?
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's, a lot of people read about me or things of that nature, but probably don't know that I'm really blessed to be from the east side of Cleveland and would not have had the opportunity to get an education were it not for sports. My dad was an electrical contractor, and from the time I was 5 years old all the way to going to college, I aspired to be an electrician. So I had my electrician's apprenticeship at the age of 15. Technically, I couldn't get certification until 16, but I had met all the requirements. My goal was to go to a 2-year school and become a full-time electrician, which is why I like construction a lot.
Yeah, well, you were doing plenty of construction, physically or not physically. There's plenty of going on at Ohio State, specifically in the athletic department. But one of the things that I do want to focus on today is about the NIL. But for the few people that don't know about NIL, maybe give them a quick summary of what that consists of.
Yeah, NIL is name, image, and likeness. It's really an opportunity for our student athletes to take advantage of their personal brand, their personal persona, and find a way for them to monetize that. And there's a lot of different ways to do it. I personally look at it as a great educational opportunity for our young people, everywhere from learning what you put on social media, because that's part of your brand. We've always taught our student athletes that human resource directors look at your social media. So if you do something inappropriate in that space, it reflects on you negatively. So do things that are positive. And so we've really tried to help them learn how to build their brand. And then ultimately now name, image, and likeness allows them to monetize that. And that might be doing sponsorships with a local restaurant or doing a local car dealership or whatever you're interested in. That might be doing camps or clinics, whatever it is. But while our student athletes are in college, it is a time for them to develop their persona, who they are, their brand, and it's at that time where they have a chance to monetize it. Many of them don't go pro or get an opportunity to chase the Olympics. So it's a critical time when they can optimize their opportunities in that space.
And I appreciate that too, because like you said, there's a lot of them that don't go pro. They're going to go pro in something else other than the sport that they're in today.
That's right.
And so how do you create the biggest impact for their brand? To maybe if it's a charity that they're involved in, maybe it's helping out others, maybe it's getting the most amount of funds possible, the way to monetize what you're at, where you're at, right, to set yourself up for success in the future. And one thing that I heard you talk about at the event that I attended was around the student debt.
Right.
What is the current student debt from the athletic side at Ohio State?
Yeah, so many of our student athletes are on partial scholarships. There's a number that are on full ride scholarships, your football, your basketballs, and some other student athletes. But majority of them are on partial, meaning they only get 10%, 15%, or 25% of their scholarship cover. So typically they'll leave with anywhere from $24,000 to $25,000 in debt once they graduate. Name, image, and likeness allows them to mitigate that to some degree, some to a great degree. We have a lacrosse player that's doing excellently in this space. He's a creator in really does well. And so a number of our student athletes are able to decrease the debt that they would normally have by earning dollars through name, image, and likeness. The other piece of it is they're learning financial management. We already have a financial literacy program that they're required to go through, but this takes them to another level because they're actually handling the money. This is no longer monopoly money. This is real money, and paying taxes. Majority of them, super majority of them, never paid taxes before. So learning what that means, and if you get a sponsorship deal and that sponsor pays you $5,000, they're normally paying you in gross. So you have to hold back 40% or whatever it is for your taxes, as opposed to spending it all and then searching for it once the tax person comes around. So it's a great opportunity for young people to mitigate their debt and learn a little bit more about financial literacy.
I love that you're touching on financial literacy. I first got out of school, and my first gig out of school was I worked with a guy named Roland Williams. He was the tight end for the St. Louis Rams, and we taught life skills to underprivileged youth in Rochester, New York, and in St. Louis, where he was at the time. And I think that is important because it's, what's your credit score and how do you pay taxes and what should you do? How are you going to be a professional outside of your sport? And we'd bring in the leaders from that the corporate world as well, and we'd bring in like American Gladiators and crazy people as well. But
that's good.
But you have to have fun enjoying that process and guiding these people, regardless if they're professional athletes, collegiate athletes, or kids still in high school. It's how are you prepping them for that success.
That's right.
And
so true.
So tell me more about that, because you said that one thing I also heard was Ryan Day mentioned to keep that team intact he's the head football coach at Ohio State. He said it takes about $13 million to keep that team intact, which is a crazy amount of money.
Yeah, it is.
But how are you continuing to develop that group? Maybe share the importance of building their brand from day one. Hey, I'm committing at Ohio State. To how do you pay your taxes? How do you have a business plan? How do you create success for the future? Is there something at Ohio State that you guys are developing, or how does that look like?
Yeah, we've always had a leadership institute that requires our student athletes to go through 8 sessions on financial literacy, resume writing. Actually, we require all of our sophomores to have resumes. It's mandatory. And so we have an educational platform that is really important. And with this, we just added NIL. And so when Ryan was talking about the $13 million, he was talking about, if you had a football team that every athlete was earning something in the NIL space based upon their position and their persona and things of that nature. His analysis was that you need about $13 million. And so that comes through corporate relationships. We had a couple of athletes do a deal with Express. We had an athlete do a deal with Donato's. We had an athlete do a deal with Heartland Bank. And so taking advantage of the community interest in our athletes, and some of them were tied to charities. Some of the corporations were paying the student athletes to participate in their charitable initiatives. And so trying to make sure that we teach our student athletes that when you make a commitment, you need to understand what that accountability is. What's beautiful for us is athletes get that anyway. So if you commit to doing, 3 or 4 Instagram stories a month, or you commit to show up to X number of events over a 3-month period, that accountability is there. Our athletes get it. They know how to do that. And so it's another layer of education that our student athletes benefit from. And we focus on that in our Leadership Institute.
In a competitive market, does your customer service stand out from the crowd? One way to offer a better experience is by moving your contact center to the cloud. But with so many options to choose from, how do you know which solution is the best for both your business and your customers? That's where VDS comes in and guides you to the best solution. They understand your client's pain points, business outcomes, and goals. Then VDS designs, implements, supports, and provides 24/7 managed services. From start to finish, VDS is committed to finding the best solutions for your clients' needs. To learn more, go to www.govds.com. or find a link in the show notes.
I think there's so many parallels, and I was a collegiate athlete, not at Ohio State. I wouldn't have cut it, but there are so many parallels between collegiate sports and the real world, and in the professional work life, and
True.
dedication and commitment and mindset and perseverance. And
Right.
I love that you guys have that group that not just will focus on the NIL, but the financial literacy and kind of having that holistic journey to making sure that collegiate athlete is not just successful
Right.
at Ohio State University, but they're moving forward. So I really appreciate that.
That's so important. I was a part of this, and many of my guys that I played with and other athletes across the country, many of the things you didn't realize what you learned through sport participation and competition until you were out of college. And our focus has always been to help our student athletes learn in the moment what they're learning through sport, understanding pressure, understanding how to get back up once you fail, understanding what success means. And when you do realize success, what does that mean? The perseverance and all those type of things. When we ask our student athletes, if you have an 8 o'clock job, what time do you show up? They're going to show up at 7:45. And so that's something that's embedded in their experiences, but teaching them that while they're having those experiences is where we have an opportunity to give them an edge, particularly when they go interview for jobs. And so because they can demonstrate, they can articulate moments through sport participation and competition where they experience certain things that allow them to be able to transition into the work environment. We do a lot of internships. We do a lot of shadowing for our student athletes so that they can understand what it means to be in the workplace, because many of them didn't work at all throughout their K through 12 experience. So our Leadership Institute is strong in that.
That's great. So switching over to the recruiting side, obviously Ohio State and all departments and all sports, you want to have the best athletes, and you want to bring in the top tier 100 athletes per sport. It's just not going to happen. And it's crazy now because some of the athletes are deciding based off of that highest bidder. They're saying, what can you get me? What are the 5 things, or what's the highest amount that you can provide me over my 3-year, 4-year, 5-year term? So, I guess when it comes to Ohio State, how are you making sure that you're not falling into saying, hey, we're going to give you, obviously you can't say, I'm going to give you $6 million over this amount of time, because it's the relationship that's built between the corporate organizations. But how are you portraying that to that prospect and staying true to that standard of excellence that you guys have at Ohio State University?
Yeah, and that's a great segue. That's part of who we are. We talk about character. We talk about integrity, and that is a life lesson for you that you'll carry wherever you go. If you go pro or if you go to work somewhere, your character and your integrity are critical along with your talent. And so what we try and help them understand is there's schools in the industry who are offering inducements. They're violating NCAA rules and offering you a package. We don't do that. What we do is share with you what what our environment can offer you if you do the right things and you have the capacity to do some things in the NIL space. We can't tell you what those dollar figures are. But what happens for us, as long as we do what we're supposed to do with our current student athletes, that conversation happens in the locker room. We have, a number of student athletes that are well over $1 million in what they earn through NIL. And that information is shared. When a recruit comes to campus, they're spending more time with our athletes than they are with our coaches or administrators. So the athletes tell them. And many of our student athletes have cars through car sponsorship relationships. And so they'll tell them about that. Some of them have apartment deals where they're only paying their utilities and not paying rent. So because they're doing apartment NIL deals. And so there's the student athletes tell them, this is what you're capable of earning if you're at The Ohio State University, if you take advantage of the programs and you build your brand and your persona the right way. So we try and share with them that this is how it works here. While there's probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 schools out there that are, breaking rules and things of that nature, we're not going to go there. And that's just who we are.
Yeah, you still want to compete. You still want to give them the best foot forward and say, I'm going to give you every opportunity to succeed.
Right.
Academically, athletically, and with the conversations with NIL. But if you go past the line and outside the borders, then you're going to get your hand slapped at some time.
That's right.
And that's not the Ohio State way.
No, it's not. And that's not who you should be. I mean, when you make that move to enter into that space, you're joining that behavior. And so, I've heard about and haven't seen, but I've heard about some agreements that schools or lawyers are making. And at the end of the day, are those truly firm contractual agreements? If you tear your ACL, are they still going to pay you? And so they're paying you this agreement. They're doing this agreement based upon a persona that you haven't even developed yet. And so there's a lot of issues around the inducements that are happening. And I always tell everyone in the media, my colleagues and everywhere, it's not happening everywhere. We only read about the few, and it seems like it's everywhere, but it's not. And so we just got to keep it in perspective. But at the end of the day, that's the level we're competing at. And so we have to have a strategy to combat it.
Yeah, when you're bringing in these prospective players, regardless of the sport, I like that you're bringing in the current athletes into that conversation. You're putting your arm around them and saying, hey, this is what our expectation of you. Yeah, you're going to be a great athlete in high school. Mm-hmm. And congratulations, you are a top 50, top 100 athlete. But here's our expectations. Here's where we're going to compete. And here's what we can do. When it comes to athletes that are currently inside Ohio State, the transfer portal is a little bit bonkers, and it's all the new rules are making it a little bit crazy. So with everything that you're doing for that student athlete in that whole holistic conversation that we're having, how are you minimizing the risk of players transferring to that next company or that next university?
The transfer rule has been in place for a super majority of our sports for a long time. And when it came in play for these 5 sports, which is football and basketball and a couple others, I actually told our coaches, you need to go talk to your colleagues, in the soccer program and baseball and others, because they've been going through it for a long time. And so the critical piece of that is to make sure you recruit with character and you make sure you have an environment that young people don't want to leave. Now, if someone wants to leave, and I've always said this with the other sports where transfers exist before, if someone wants to leave because of true playing time, that's different. If they reach the level and they realize they can't play at The Ohio State University and someone's passed them up, but they want to play and they want to transfer to a school where they can play, let them go. I've always said that. But if they're leaving because they're unhappy or we mistreated them or something of that nature, that's a problem. Don't look at them, look at us. What did we do wrong? And so we are blessed that our coaches embrace that concept, and we do our best to try and make sure that in our circle of care, we call it, student athletes are well taken care of and they enjoy their experience and their parents enjoy their experience. But at the end of the day, when they're ready to transfer, we try and make sure that it's for the right reasons.
Got it. I appreciate that answer. And, bringing it back to money real quick, I actually had the opportunity to sit next to and spend a day with Floyd Little, now Hall of Famer, and for the Denver Broncos. And he was talking about his playing days. And he's like, man, I cashed my checks at the 7-Eleven.
Yeah.
at the very beginning. I got a Slurpee and a beef stick, and I had enough to get me through the next couple weeks.
Yeah, that's great.
And just hearing that story, I'm like, man, this is a Hall of Famer who now probably makes, way more money than he is now outside of athletics. But it's crazy on how things have changed in that time. But you did touch on Circle of Care. How does that align with Circle of Care, or what does Circle of Care mean in Ohio State?
Yeah, so I've always been a proponent that everyone who works in the athletic department works for the student athlete. And so in today's world, when student athletes are struggling with the issue or looking for some help, it's not always from the coach who recruited them, or it might not always be from the athletic trainer. It might be from the strength coach, or it might be from the academic advisor. It might be from the compliance officer. It might be from the sports nutritionist or the sports psychologist. So everyone that touches the student athlete in some form or fashion is in that circle of care. Our faculty athletic representative, the administrator for the sport, the director of operations, all these people are in touch with that student athlete in some form or fashion. So that student athlete has someone that she or he feels comfortable talking to about a particular issue. And all their issues are different. And they might have a different person that they feel comfortable talking about based upon that issue. So in this day and age, particularly around mental health, student athletes may be having problems at home, maybe having identification problems with their sexuality, or whatever it might be. In that circle of care, they should be able to find a person that they're comfortable going to and talking about it. Today, if a student athlete has a bad practice, somebody in that circle of care might know why. And so you just want to make sure everyone is attentive and the student athlete understands that all those people are there for her or him if they need help.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And one of the pillars that you have is around mental health, and it's now more important than ever, and it's getting a bigger impression online, which is great. You currently have 4 full-time sports psychologists now, which I think is amazing. And one, how is that impacting your athletes today? One of the athletes that the biggest name right now is Harry Miller, kind of going out and talking about how he struggled, and he went around and talking about online. It looks like he's looking to write a book as well about it. But sometimes it just takes that extra person and willingness to hear that person out and the opportunity to listen.
Right.
And if you're not listening, then you don't know what else is going on in that person's world. So, why was that so impactful to have that mental health as one of your pillars?
Years ago, we started paying attention to it and getting educated on it. And we started adding sports psychologists to our team because they're the experts. And while we were reading and getting educated, we still needed experts in our space. And so experts who train our coaches, our strength coaches, our trainers, administrators, they train us on what to look for. And what you said is critical, listening. We can't diagnose, we can't offer sports psychologist type advice, but we can listen and refer. And we can pay attention to behaviors and triggers and things of that nature. So being sensitive to the fact that an individual is going through a challenge and referring them to the expert is so important. And having the right approach and demeanor as you're dealing with that listening in that moment. And so it's really, really important. Today's young people have so many stressors in their lives, and social media is one of them. And so how do we make sure that we're there to provide that care? And fortunately, with Harry Miller, the example you used, Ryan Day was there, and our sports psychiatrist was there. And so we have people surrounding him that care.
Yeah, it's great. And like you said, the listening and paying attention of what's being said and what's not being said. Because if you can go past what's not being said, you can have a larger impact in that person's life. And maybe nobody, obviously I'm in customer service, customer experience side. You don't come into work and bring just the senior vice president, head of athletics to work. You bring your whole life to work.
That's right.
And the same is true with athletics. You bring your whole life to work. And sometimes that is overwhelming and hard.
That's right. That's exactly right. So you have to, everyone you hope with these young people understands that exactly what you said. They besides their athleticism, besides their academics, they got a number of other things that they're dealing with in their lives. And so it could be a financial thing. whatever it is, we just need to be there for them.
Great. Appreciate that. So I have wrap up every podcast with 2 questions.
Okay.
The first one is, what book or person has influenced you the most in the past year? So I'll pause there.
I'm blessed. My wife, Sheila Smith, who was on the Olympics in '76 for Canada. She was head basketball coach at UNLV and athletic administrator at UNLV and the expert fundraiser over the years and at different places. And, she inspires me every year. That doesn't change for me. There's no new person, that I meet that inspires me. And she inspires me all the time. And besides our children and grandchildren, she's the one.
Very cool, man. It's an awesome answer. Yeah. So the second one I got for you is, if you leave a note to every college athlete or potential college athlete who's interested in Ohio State, what would you say to them?
I would say to them, focus on self-awareness. I believe that people need to be really introspective and be self-aware. It's so critical. How can you manage others or have relationships with others if you're not truly in touch with yourself? So I would say study self-awareness and become self-aware.
Sound advice. What's the best way, if somebody, a corporate person, was interested in maybe learning a little bit more about NIL from the Ohio State University, how do I get in touch, or how do they get in touch, or where do they learn more information?
Yeah, so Carrie Hoyt, Hoyt, is a person that oversees NIL. You can go to OhioStateBuckeyes.com. You can find her on our staff directory, but you can also find more information about NIL underneath the athletic link at OhioStateBuckeyes.com. You can click on NIL. It'll give you all the guidelines and all of our programming in place.
It's great, Gene Smith. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mike.
Enjoyed the conversation and wishing you guys nothing but success.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate you. Go Bucks.
Go Bucks. Hey, listeners, can you think of one person who would benefit from the information you learned today? If so, please consider sharing this episode with them. And last, if you would like to receive all the quotes and book recommendations from all my guests, you can go to pressonefornick.com/podcast.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Press One for Nick. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe and share. Until next time, focus on your customers.
Thanks for joining us for this session of CX of M Radio. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show, and visit cxofm.org for more resources.